Get up at any time if you're comfortable and need a break. And then, yeah, let's say 2 minutes and then we'll start.
That makes sense. Yes. We sit down.
And then after we do our individual
Great service, yeah.
the high quality. Ready? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us on this Friday evening, this lovely Friday evening. Doesn't even feel like an evening. So, welcome to this event. Excited to have a few guest speakers here, which I'll introduce shortly. So this event is the Science of Neurodiverse Workplaces. We have guests from BBC and Google who we've worked with for a few years now working on these things. I thought we would start with this because we want to keep this fairly interactive. So the plan is you'll hear briefly from the three of us, four of us, the four of us. But we want to hear from you too. So we're going to make sure we have a good amount of time for question and answers, thoughts, and these sort of things. So if you want to, we'll do this, somewhat quasi-scientifically, but for the QR code, you can either join at menti.com and then use that code 89574604, or point the camera on your smartphone. One word. What one word comes to mind when you think of neurodiversity in the workplace? And then we'll flash it's a word cloud, so we'll see what words come up if there's more frequent ones. So take a second for that. Hey, Simone. Didn't see you before. And then while you're thinking about that, totally optional, no one has to register, but curious what you're thinking, the one word thing, we might incorporate this into our talk. So brief housekeeping things, not expecting a fire drill today. So if it is, let's assume it's the real thing, hopefully not. But if we do, exits are clearly marked right out this way. So green arrow with the sign, follow down the stairs, out this way. And that's the main thing. So I'm going to leave this up for another 10 seconds, and then let's get into it. All right. So let me briefly talk about this. This has been kind of a three-part partner project. So we'll start with us. My name is Tyler Shores. I'm the director of the University of Cambridge ThinkLab. So we're a bit of like a startup, a research startup within the overall university. We're centrally based near where the old schools. This is the Senate House building, which is right in the middle of everything, the heart of the University of Cambridge administration. So we work across different disciplines, and really we try to bring, exactly like it says, connect researcher expertise from all different domains of knowledge with partner organizations such as BBC, Google, local communities. We work across a diverse range of projects, and then really our mission is fostering real-world social impact through this kind of academic, public-private industry collaboration. I'll kind of show pictures worth 1,000 words. So here are pictures worth many thousands of words, I suppose, in terms of like, look at the broad breadth in terms of organizations that we work with. So we've got BBC and Google with us today. We've worked with NHS, Adam Brooks Hospital, on different projects ranging from neurodiversity at work, which we're going to talk about more today, future of work, meaning online, physical places that we work in, NHS on climate change behaviors with Adam Brooks Hospital, a very cool project coming up with Wikipedia on fake news and misinformation in education, so we'll have more to talk about that soon. We've had Pixar recently on the same topic of accessibility, neurodiversity, and representation in film. So that was a lot of fun. We had Pixar. They allowed us, after very strict, ominous legal warnings, to do a live screening of Loop, which is this great animated short about a mute autistic character. And we were able to do that. And we brought David and Sean from BBC to kind of talk and just say, like, hey, let's share some of these things about how like neurodiversity is shown in different forms of media. We're working with Reddit right now on AI and misinformation. And most recently, I see a couple of familiar faces. 2 days ago, only 2 days ago, we were here in this very room talking about Cambridge sustainable food. So a variety of things that we work on. And essentially, like our area of expertise is challenges, tricky, complex challenges that don't fit neatly within one department or one domain of knowledge. So the kind of things that apply in lots of different places. So we do research. Sometimes that means talks, presentations. Our focus is on lived experience, which we'll talk about a little bit more together, and creative outputs. Sometimes those are podcasts. Maybe that could be movies or documentaries that we'll figure out together. So this is what we do in a nutshell. But more importantly, and keep here at the Cambridge Festival. So let me say a few words. And we're all researchers within the Cambridge ThinkLab. So my work in particular focuses on digital habits. So specifically how we work, how we think, how what we do online affects how we relate to other people in all of these things. So just to highlight, to kind of context set a little bit in terms of online and hybrid work is certainly up, especially over the past few years, but it's up almost 25% across various countries from 2021 through 2025 now. We have more ways of communicating. We have too much, and then I kind of left it broad here, too much everything. We now have too many ways of communicating. How many different channels do we have for those of you that have online work things? Like it could be email, it could be Slack, it could be WhatsApp, it could go on and on. Too many meetings, too much information, too many demands on us and all of these things. So this is a little bit of the stuff that we're trying to bring together. So a few number of things here. I didn't want to bog us down right from the beginning, but looking at some of these things, research suggests that. It's in the context of neurodiversity at work, the first two are specifically about neurodiversity. The third one applies to all workers in general. So the first one, research suggests that teams with neurodivergent professionals in some roles can be 30% more productive than those without them. So the key word in that is some, finding the right match for the people who have the right skills and the things that it's a good marriage of the things that they work well at and how they're able to work together. Recent survey just from last year, 68% of employees, this was in the US, but the UK numbers are kind of similar, reported being unfamiliar with neurodiversity. So that's kind of not dissimilar from the opening question that we started with here. So it's kind of I might have heard about what that is, but I'm not really sure. If you push me, I couldn't really give a definition. That is a very high percentage. So that's something for us to think about too for the rest of this hour together. This last one, so my favorite area of research is digital distraction. So this is kind of like an everything one, but Gloria Mark, a researcher based in California whose work I think is really good, says that on average nowadays, with all of that too much that I was talking about, email, social media, text, everything else, other people, Amazon deliveries, whatever, for working at home, we're distracted at work approximately 3 to 5 minutes on average. That's a lot of distractions. That's a lot of distractions in general. So that's somewhere in the range of 20 per hour, multiply that by 7 or 8 hours. So that's a lot. And not only are we distracted, that comes with a cost for neurotypical and neurodivergent individuals in terms of it's just harder to do work because there's so much stuff that's demanding our attention and all of these things. So these are everyone, everywhere problems. I don't know, skip this too fast. So I mostly wanted to talk about some of these things and kind of set the context for why we're doing this event right now. So this started, Sean, when did we start? I can't remember anymore. 2021? 2022? Yeah. I don't think I had a kid yet, so 2021. Yeah, that's right. So this goes back at least 3 or 4 years now, working with BBC and thinking in terms of workplace culture change and all of these things, and then really just sort of kind of converged upon neurodiversity and accessibility and these sort of things because it was a common theme, something that we noticed was emerging in terms of like how people work. I won't repeat too much, but like kind of getting in the principles of universal design. So it's not just like an accommodation thing. Universal design means best practice, best design for everyone. And how could we do that? How could we figure out ways to do this? And what we stumbled upon with our collaboration over these past few years is really focusing on co-design, co-production, which is the idea that we draw upon. So like it's a research ethos, research approach in terms of like that means the people who are influenced by these research outcomes and by these decisions should have a say every step of the way in terms of like the questions that we ask, how we ask those questions, how we go about doing these things, and that's really what we're trying to embed all throughout these past few years of doing stuff. So enough for me. I think the last thing I want to say, actually not, I lied. You will hear from me more in the panel, but for now, I want to turn it over to our guest speakers. So various ways to keep in touch with us. Another QR code which takes you to our website. You can email us at the bottom at thinklab@admin.cam.ac.uk. We do want to hear from you actually. So like in terms of like if you have questions about research, if you have things that you want to share with us, like we do care about these things. So like we want to hear from you if you have thoughts on all of this. Social media stuff, we're on various things, Blue Sky, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter a little less. I don't call it X. X is too 90s branding for me, so Twitter, sometimes. This is our website if you want to see some of the projects that we're doing, but more to come. So that's the starting point, and now I'm going to turn it over to Aurelia. Thanks, Aurelia. Should I introduce you, or do you want to introduce yourself? Okay. I'll do like a semi-biographical intro. So Aurelia, you kind of came aboard with us, started working with us over a year ago now, and you're the neurodiversity lead at Google Ireland and a neurodiversity coach. So yeah, I think that's probably good enough. I'm going to stop saying words right now and turn it over to you. So you have the floor. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Okay, hi everyone. So as Tyler said, my name is Aurelia. So I am the co-chair of the Disability Alliance at Google Ireland, which is our employee resource group representing and advocating for the needs of our disabled employees. And because I represent people who are neurodivergent, obviously it's a large cohort of people. The site of Google Ireland has about 8,000 people, so you can calculate approximately how many neurodivergent people would be there. And I am also a neurodiversity coach, like Tyler said, so I do career and executive coaching specifically geared towards neurodivergent individuals. I've been diagnosed as autistic a few years back, and so that was a big shift for me because I was 33, so I guess I'm like, Jesus Christ, like something great happened to me at 33. But yeah, so this is why I come to talk today about different aspects of this. So what does it mean to operate within an ERG, for example, in a large corporation? And a little bit of a disclaimer, of course, I do not represent Google LLC, right? So everything that I say is my own opinion, right? And I'm going to talk a little bit about as well neurodiversity in general. Like, it's not going to be 101 because I think a lot of you already know what it is, but I just want to cover the spectrum in its entirety because we talk a lot about autism and ADHD, but that's not just that. You know, when we talk about neurodiversity, it's actually a lot of different things. So I just want to cover that a little bit as well. So this is my working title. So how I succeeded by thinking outside the box because I had no idea there was a box, right? So until I was diagnosed, I was actually struggling quite a lot. In my 20s, I couldn't really hold down a job. I had substance abuse issues. It really wasn't great. And so now, let's say that I've made it, or whatever, you know, success can look like. But this only happened after I learned to work with my strengths. And some of that stuff, I wouldn't consider it strength, you know, like sensory processing disorder. I also have dyscalculia, and I work in sales. I mean, I'll let you imagine the problem with that. So yeah, there's a lot of things that you can do to sort of leverage your strength again, and that's why I became a coach. So I want to cover a little bit of that today as well. And we'll have a Q&A as well, like Tyler said. So I've just said all of that stuff, so I'm not going to repeat. So 15 to 20% of the general population, and that's obviously an estimate and an hypothesis. I mean, it's difficult to say, but we estimate that the world population exhibits some form of neurodivergence. So again, that's a lot of people. I have dyscalculia. I cannot tell you how many that is, but you can make the calculation yourself. It's still a lot of people. And on this, for example, in Google Ireland, if we're 8,000 people, like it will represent a significant amount of people. So we talked about designing digital and physical spaces for neurodivergent folks, but what does it mean? Because, for example, I'm an autistic person who is very sensory avoidant, so I hate light, noise, etc., all sort of sensory stimulation. But what if I work with someone who is sensory seeking, right? So they need bright lights, they need a lot of stimulation. Like, how does that work to create a physical space? Like, that technically, that's impossible. So a few things we work on is creating hybrid spaces. So if I want to work from home, I can connect with someone who's in the office, for example. Working asynchronously is really common as well, and especially COVID actually helped with all those technologies, right? Zoom and Google Meet and whatever. So this is something we're trying to work on as well, but there's going to be a shift within management, right? What we teach managers now and sort of try to train them on is to value outcomes instead of how things are being done. So I can, produce the same output or the same outcome, whereby it's, an amount of money or a productivity unit of sorts. And you don't have to tell me which way I should take, to get there, which path, right? So if I have ADHD, if I'm autistic, or if I'm bipolar, if I'm epileptic, like it doesn't matter. The outcome, if you succeed at it and you deliver, it doesn't matter the path that you take, right? So a few concepts I want to cover. Again, the neurodivergent umbrella, I think you may have heard of this. So you have a lot of different sort of traits and attributes there. I don't want to use the word disorder, obviously. And we're trying to expand it as well. For example, I want to emphasize that at Google and different ERGs across different companies, we include it is classified as a mental illness. There's not really another word for it, but for example, schizophrenia is included within the neurodivergent umbrella, and some people want to manage it. Same thing for bipolar. This is something you just have to deal with, and so it's not because you're schizophrenic or you have bipolar disorder that you don't want to work, right? Obviously. So we have to include all of these folks, and we have to find a way to make the workplace work for them as well. So it's very interesting considering all the types of people, again, that can be included under that umbrella, and this is still a bit of a moving target because it's an evolving field and there's still people sort of uncovering what it means for them, and psychiatry doesn't agree also with what we're trying to represent, as a movement as well. So yeah, this is a little bit of, again, a moving target. Another one of the concepts I wanted to cover was the wheel of power. So I'm not going to go into all of this because this is not a sociology masterclass, but if you have never seen it, I encourage you to just have a look at the whole wheel. It's talking about the intersection of different identities and what it means for you as a person. So the more different identities are going to intersect for you, the more potentially marginalized or privileged you're going to be. Right? So if you take, for example, color, so if you're white, you're not going to have the same experience as if you're a person of color. So that's one of the dimensions on the wheel. Same thing if you're disabled. So if you're not disabled, you're not going to have the same experience as someone who is disabled. And then you imagine that with all of the dimensions on the wheel, right? So housing, body size, sexuality, formal education. So, if you imagine people who are the intersections of several minorities, like, for example, trans person of color who's neurodivergent, they're not going to have the same experience as a white guy, basically, and this is something we need to talk about a little bit more, because you cannot consider the lived experience of people if you don't consider their multiple identities. So in terms of challenges in the workplace, we can imagine, I've just covered this, all of these different groups will have different challenges, so I'm not making blanket statements, obviously, but there are a few things I want to cover. One of them is the social model of disability. So you've just heard me say, I don't want to use the word disorder, for example. That's typical of the medical model of disability, which sees people like me as having a deficit of sorts, right? When you look at the diagnostics manual for autism, it's going to say, deficit in communication, poor interpersonal skills, unable to create, long-lasting relationships, fixed interest, it's very negative, right? So if I read this and I think, okay, that's me, I guess. Okay, so what am I supposed to do with this? Do you want me to talk to an employer like this and say, this is, me, I have all these deficits? do you want to employ me? Like, that doesn't really give a lot of confidence to disabled folks. So this is something we really want to avoid and move away from. So we're going to use words, we're going to avoid saying things like disorder or deficits, and we're going to say traits or attributes and strengths. There is a debate about using words like superpowers, etc. Personally, I wouldn't. I would just use neutral language, because telling me I have a superpower is also putting a lot of pressure on me in a different way. So you can just use neutral language, like that's great, Another thing that we cover is internalized ableism. Again, this is a bit of a complicated concept, but I just wanted to put that in your head as something to consider if you think about being a disabled person in the workplace. And I'm talking about hidden disabilities or otherwise. You may have been raised in a way that made you also feel or think that you are less than other people because of your disability. And then you've heard that so much that you've internalized it. So the message of you having a deficit is not coming from outside, it's coming from inside. And then you end up thinking that way. So this is obviously something that, I go to therapy to talk about this. And I would encourage people in general who think like they may have something like this going on for them to do that. But again, it's something to consider as well. And when we think about the social model of disability, it's a different way of seeing disability, right? Some people who are neurodivergent do not identify as having a disability. They may say, hey, I'm just neurodivergent. I don't identify as being disabled. I may do, like that's their choice, no problem at all. It's just important to understand that in the workplace there are regulatory frameworks around disability because you need to give accommodations if you are disabled because this is a protected characteristics, right? Just like your race or your religion or your sexuality. So you cannot be discriminated against on the basis of that. So you are entitled by law to accommodations. So that's why I tell people, for yourself, you can drop this label of disabled, like that's absolutely all right, that's up to you. But in the workplace, you need to own it somewhat, at least with HR, basically. So you can make sure that the playing field is leveled, essentially. And yeah, maybe the last thing on this, in terms of the social model of disability, so how it differs from the medical model is that basically, it says that instead of saying I'm disabled, I have deficits in some ways, etc., it is my environment that is disabling me, right? So it's coming from like circumstances and environmental factors, and of course, we disabled folks tend to agree with that. If I can control my environment, I'm able to work full time, there's no problem. And actually, since I'm able to work from home most of the time, I'm able to have a 9-to-5 job, and I'm fine. When I had to go to the office every day, I actually was doing burnouts after burnouts because, it was very tough to be in an office environment. So you can see directly the impact that this has as well. So in terms of a few things that I want to talk about here, just one is the double empathy challenge. It's a concept that actually came through by an autistic researcher as well. And well, there's a bit of a joke on this. I wasn't sure I wanted to put it up, but yesterday when I got on a plane from Ireland, because that's where, where I live, I saw this sign on an aircraft, and it says, turn on ASD when approaching aircraft. So ASD is autism spectrum disorder. I don't know what ASD is for aircrafts, but I thought it was quite funny, so I put it there. So the double empathy sort of challenge is basically that if I'm talking to another autistic person, there's no communication problem. Like, we understand each other 100%, like same frequency. If I talk to a neurotypical person or non-autistic person, we don't understand each other because they are having issues understanding me and I'm having issues understanding them. So there's a fundamental mismatch between the way we communicate. Doesn't mean one is better than the other, but that's usually how it comes out, right? That the way I communicate it's non-standard, and so it's not the appropriate one. But we want to reframe that by saying we should both make an effort, to align our communication styles. It's not just on me to make the effort to understand you better because you are the neuro-majority, essentially. So if you want to know more about this concept, there's a lot of research, and it's quite interesting, and that's something we talk about a lot as well. Because within the neurodivergent community, when we talk to one another, when I meet someone who has ADHD, autism, or other form of neurodivergence, like, we have no issues understanding each other. So that's something that's quite interesting. I don't want to go too much into details about this either, but there's been, in the press in the past 5 years or whatever, there's been a lot of headlines like, oh, everyone has ADHD or whatever. Like, obviously that's nonsense. There's been a change in diagnostic criteria, in 2012, I think. So the DSM is the manual that psychiatrists use to diagnose mental illnesses. It's still how it's called, right? And so they changed the criteria for autism and ADHD to represent better the population that had these traits. Also because most of the observation for these criteria were based on the male exclusively. So obviously all the women were excluded, women or non-binary, were excluded from diagnostics criteria. So obviously if you change them, a lot of people are suddenly gonna be neurodivergent, you know? So this takes a while to come into practice, right, with all the psychiatrists and the psychologists diagnosing folks, and that's sort of what's happening right now. So obviously now there's a different issue where some clinics, I know NHS clinic in the UK have like an 8 years waiting list for ADHD diagnosis. It's a real problem. People are not trained as well to deal with minorities, like for example, trans, BIPOC, they even have less access to diagnostics. So that's something that we're also trying to raise awareness around. Okay, really abrupt stop. I'm sorry about this. The end, okay.
We'll save Q&A for afterwards. Thank you, Aurelia. That was great. Okay, so our two next speakers, I'll introduce you both, save you the trouble. So we're happy to have both of you from BBC. So first we have David Tennant, not that David Tennant, a David Tennant.
Sorry.
I know, I use that joke a lot. Is co-chair and co-founder of BBC Enigma, we want to hear more about soon, the staff network designed to support, celebrate, and educate all things neurodivergent in BBC. He currently works as a content producer delivering digital outreach to school children across Scotland, and is proud to be dyslexic. So, great, thank you for joining us. Sean is a senior user experience principal at the BBC and leads the workplace accessibility and inclusive design team, as well as co-chairing the neurodiversity ERG and BBC Enigma. So thank you both, ERG, BBC Enigma. Thank you both for joining us. I'm going to queue up the slides and I'm going to get out of the way. So welcome, Sean and David.
Hi, folks. Sorry to those who thought the other David Tennant was coming.
Nobody
you
walked
can leave now.
out.
It's fine. No, I'm joking.
Are we good? Yeah. Sweet.
Clicker or use that.
Cool. We've done, I think, with the intro, we've done the hello, so we can move the waving bear. Has that worked?
It's cool, though. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah.
Cool. Do you want to start?
Yeah, so BBC Enigma, what's it about? Well, we, back in 2021, seems like a long time ago now, we felt there was an urgent need to address the understanding of what it meant to be neurodivergent across the BBC. And Sean, I, and a couple of other co-founders decided to start building Enigma. And we started with a distribution list, and there was a lot of learning across the organization. And we kept building, and more people were coming, and we felt we were onto something with this. And it just gained momentum. And more people were starting to pay attention as to why this was important, not only for the well-being of staff, but also for a creative organization to be able to understand the power of neurodivergent thinking. So in 2023, we launched Enigma, and we created handbooks. Co-creation is a big part of what we believe is important when it comes to creating a staff network. And it was great. We did events all across the UK, and we had some really interesting intersectional conversations, which really important in this space, because it's it's about the variety of experiences across all different identities, which is really important when it comes to neuro-inclusion and creating that safe space. And more recently, 2024, we have neurodiversity and recognized in the staff census. We have training, and also in the recent diversity, belonging, and inclusion strategy, they've now moved to include the category as deaf, disabled, and or neurodivergent, and change the numbers across the staff workforce targets from 12 to 14. So we're incredibly proud to have helped kind of move that dialogue, I think, is probably the best way to do it. And it's been a good journey, and a really, so that's where we're at just now with Enigma. Sean?
Move on to the next one. Has that moved?
Yes.
Cool. So actually, interesting. Aurelia's slides at the beginning, I think the social model, I hadn't seen that model before, but some of the things you picked up on, I think are things that we've found also, so it kind of mirrors that finding. We created a survey initially just to understand what the problems and challenges were. Kind of the whole idea behind understanding neuroinclusion at the BBC. We based this around co-design and community design. So, understanding the problems and challenges people have by asking and then bringing people in to help us solve those problems. We had a survey of around 500 people inside and outside the organization. It identified kind of multiple different areas, stigma most prevalent within organizations in the workplace. So we came up with these 3 pillars that we started thinking about kind of how do we build neuroinclusion across the organization? How do we support thinking about it in a different way? And we identified training. Oh, sorry, I think we'll move on. So we had those kind of the training, environment, and community. So training, we understood from line managers from that survey that they didn't really know anything about neurodiversity, the understanding, the kind of awareness in the organization, in all workplaces was kind of low. And it's a bit like trying to understand a complicated formula. I appreciate we're in Cambridge and that probably means something to an awful lot of people, but metaphorically, it's kind of complicated. Everybody seems different. There is no single answer that seems to solve everything for everybody. So we started a program of training. We helped to kind of demystify. We wanted to challenge that stigma. So, people can't get help if they're not able to talk about the challenges, if they're not able to talk about their condition. So, if we help line managers, team leaders to understand what neurodiversity is, what neuroinclusion looks like, hopefully we can start lifting some of those issues across the place. It's also thinking equally about accessibility of training in the workplace. So we're not just educating team leads and line managers, we also want to think about what accessibility to training, career development exists within the organization. Because learning is different cognitive styles appreciate information delivered in certain ways, and sometimes the training delivered in the workplace doesn't always meet the needs of everybody, for a multitude of different reasons. So how do we think about neurodiversity when we're building accessible learning experiences? So that was the training. The environment, again, it's thinking about kind of the physical space. So we found, different workplaces. Again, it's something Aurelia's mentioned in terms of, COVID and lockdown kind of accelerated this hybrid approach to working. And it's not necessarily that we found everybody enjoyed working at home permanently or preferred the office. It's kind of not that linear 0 or 1 scale. It's how do you find that sweet spot in the middle where you can do the kind of work you need to do in the place you like to do it. So one of the first builds, we actually had the opportunity to think about neuro-inclusive design as part of one of our moves from the outskirts of Cardiff. Our the BBC Wales HQ moved into the centre of town. We were able to share kind of learnings from the network, and we started thinking about what neuro-inclusive spaces look like. That was the first building we managed to introduce some of those design features. So thinking about kind of colour, pattern use across the building, different spaces. So I think there's up to 30 different styles of workspace, from big open collaborative spaces right the way through to kind of individual spaces, kind of quiet pods if people need to just get away from things. We thought about lighting, about sound, wayfinding and navigation. So there's different tips, and we can now kind of roll those out across the estate. We don't have to build new buildings all the time. These can be things that can be introduced as part of a general maintenance program, as and when things come across. So it's a slow progress, but it's things that you can do gradually and affordably. I think also, I'll let you talk to this, when we say environment, we're thinking about the culture in the organization. So kind of, how do we kind of help people talk about what they need? Again, if we can create that safe space for people. And I think you wanted to say a bit more on that.
I think just on the environment and the different types of environment, it's you don't necessarily know as someone who's neurodivergent what those spaces, how those spaces work for you, but having access to those spaces is incredible, because you can just go in and try it out and see how it fits, you know, and then kind of go somewhere else. And it's just the consideration that someone, and you know, I first got involved in this project because I found out that the carpets were designed for neuro inclusion. I was like, that's really cool. And it was just like that simple kind of like thoughtfulness around designing for environments just makes you think kind of like valued, which is such an important thing to consider when you're thinking about those environment designs as well, I think. I suppose you don't know as an ND person what works, but it's just nice to try things out, isn't it? Like, and I think communities, yeah, hugely important. Like, one thing with Enigma is it's absolutely about creating a community where everyone feels safe. And psychological safety is an absolutely foundation, like a kind of like a pillar for all of this stuff, because I can't remember off the top of my head what all the different things are, but you know, psychological safety is about inclusion and communication and making sure that you feel valued, and co-creation and all of that stuff, the good stuff, the stuff that makes belonging an important thing. And I think with co-creation, that's absolutely critical. If you want to get the best out of a community, you need to have psychological safety where they can make mistakes, they can try stuff out, they don't have the fear of, you know, of failure as such, as it were, and they can be their authentic self, which I think is really important. And we've built through Enigma, you know, or in fact, what you find is role models come forward, people who own their identity across all intersections, and I think that by having really good relationships with all the other networks in the BBC, we can have those really interesting conversations. So we had a great event with the Pride network about, well, okay, so you're LGBTQ plus and you're neurodivergent. What's it like for the double coming out? You know, what is that space like? And even that was a really interesting conversation, because it was like, yeah, that's cool. That's like, we can all get involved in that and kind of like understand it. And then we've tried to do that across all the different kind of identities and show that kind of intersectional conversation. And it's about adding value to the conversation and including everyone in the conversation, which I think has been really valuable with Enigma. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else.
I don't think so, no. Just what we found, you know, as a result of bringing this community together and being able to support different kind of groups within that. So whether that's individuals, whether that's kind of neurodivergent individuals, neurotypical people who want to know more about it, whether it's, you know, thinking about parents, you know, how we work with our other staff networks to find those interesting questions around intersectionality, which all speak to that wheel of power that Aurelia mentioned earlier on. I think we've also had the number of people that have come to us and said, you know, I didn't know there was anybody else like me. I thought I was the only one in my team or my department or the organisation who was autistic or ADHD.
I think that's the biggest thing, is when someone comes and says they feel seen, that's like hugely powerful in terms of a driving force. And I think,
No, that's all right.
and I think that's hugely powerful, and lots of people felt that, which makes the whole kind of like thing really, really worthwhile doing.
Why are we doing it? I suppose the message that we're trying to give, you know, at the BBC as a creative organisation, this is about how do we create new things? How do we innovate constantly? And I think it's a message from the industry that speaks to all industries. I don't think creativity doesn't sit in one sector, in one place. We're not in one box. Creativity exists everywhere. You know, across all industries. We all have to think about new ways of doing things, or how to do things better, or how to get over these problems or these challenges that we face. So really, it's just the power of diversity within organizations and within teams and within departments. It's the power of offering kind of inclusion and a sense of belonging, so that you can get those different perspectives. We all bring different things with us. And that's all valuable in the workplace. And it's, you know, if we can open up those avenues to creativity, if we can create spaces that help people think differently and work together coherently and in ways that kind of, you know, meet that double empathy challenge that we have, ultimately we think that leads to innovation. You know, and that's a mechanism by which we can all improve, we can all grow. You know, we hear a lot about improving productivity and such, but maybe we don't think about it quite like this. It's not just about drilling more out of people. Maybe we can just work more effectively and bring people into places and help them work together. And I think just finally on the last slide, we all kind of talk about this a lot. Again, it's that beauty of understanding kind of talent, and maybe think about talent differently, and how we assess it and understand it, how we invite talent into the workplace, into whatever institutions they are. Maybe it doesn't look like what we always thought it was. Maybe a CV isn't the best way to find out what people can do and what they can bring. So, you know, the idea that, you know, everybody is a genius, but if we judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing it's stupid. And I think we're at a time now where, you know, that makes sense, and we can utilize that and just think about what we can do to open up opportunities for people for the benefit of everybody. And I think that's us. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to do a song. No, we're not.
Panel. So we're
Cool.
going to sit over here. So we're going to turn it over to let's get interactive now. So we move this out of the way, move this beer.
Okay, so over.
I'm going to switch forward.
Okay.
Can I give you that? Can I just do this one? Thank you.
Well, we want to hear from you. Amaya, we have microphones and things.
Yeah, I'll be running around a mic running if you want to ask a question, and then we're just getting up if you go to the end of this, we have a QR code if you want to submit a question online instead as well.
Got it.
Okay. Just loading. No? Hey, yay, there we go. I thought about it. Okay, here we go. We've got some questions. Do you want to sit?
Questions from the audience, but if you want to just like write something, we'll keep an eye on this, and that can be another way to do it. So
Great.
we'll start there.
Do you want to sit and I'll... Yeah, we'll get started. All right. I'll go here first. Here you go.
This is a question both for the BBC and for the Google representative. Do you have champions at board level? That's number one for this project, or and if you don't, what's the highest person in the organisation that is championing what you're doing? I think that's probably the most important one.
Sure. Yeah, so that's a great question, actually, because having support at a higher level is essential to the mission, both to actually get money to do things and also to get the message from top down, because there's a lot of people at our level doing a lot of great things for free, essentially. Google is an enormous organization, as you know, but we're very lucky, actually, in Ireland that our executive sponsor is the site lead of Google Ireland. So it's the top guy in Ireland. So we're extremely lucky. It's not like that in a lot of countries. And to your question, I do not think we have representation on the board of Google, because it's mostly institutional investors. But we do have people who are quite high up who care about disability inclusion specifically. So we are lucky in that sense.
Oh, just use the mic. It's hard to hear back here. Sorry. No?
I might have to borrow the mic. Is that okay? Yeah, from the BBC's perspective, yes, we do. We have Roger Talfin-Davis, who sits as the Nations Director for the BBC. So he sits on the top board for the BBC. But we also have regional representatives as well across some of the UK hubs who champion. And exactly to that point, it absolutely helps drive the change, because otherwise it'd be very difficult, I think.
Okay, another question. Come here first. Here you go.
Hi, thank you guys so much for doing this panel. It's really interesting. I work at the Autism Research Center here at the university in community engagement, and it's always interesting to see how some of these things get applied to other fields. One of the challenges that I've found as both someone working in community engagement in the autism research field and as an autistic woman myself is dealing with the stigma that is still kind of very pervasive around autism in particular, but many other kind of conditions within the neurodiversity umbrella. One of the things that we talk about a lot is how there is a lot of kind of push to hire, push to make the hiring process more accessible and more kind of neurodiversity friendly, but there are not a lot of people kind of at the top who are willing to come out as neurodivergent because of this stigma. And there's a lot of burden placed on people like me, like you guys, to be open about our neurodivergence while still not kind of creating those pathways up to the top in career progression. So I guess what I'm wondering is, in what ways do you see the pathway to progress in your career being supported by your organizations, and are there any kind of people at the top who have been willing to brave the stigma and be out about their neurodivergence that allow you to kind of see that progress in action?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I think it's interesting in terms of, because that's it, the hiring policies are great, you get them in the door, and then that's, you know, they quickly leave again. I think Sean's, the expression of kind of like, you know, make sure your house is in order before you invite people around for tea is hugely important in this space. And I think we're kind of currently exploring a kind of end-to-end life cycle project as to how we can ensure that talent is not only getting in the door, but, you know, is supported at every part of that career cycle, which I think is hugely valuable. And there are people who are coming forward slowly. It's trying to kind of convince them that it's a safe space across all echelons of the business. And I think that, you know, there is still a bit of stigma in terms of weakness, maybe in some of these places, which is wrong. You know, I'm just assuming here. But there are more and more senior leaders coming out as ND, which is fantastic.
I think, is this working at all either? I don't know, I could try and shout. I think the other thing is that because so many people in those senior positions are older, there's a lot of people that haven't perhaps had an assessment or diagnosis, so they might feel that they are ND, but don't know for sure, and maybe that's also a challenge. But I think that, you know, not negating the fact that stigma exists, and I think there are still a lot of people who are quietly ND and don't really step forward, and that would be really valuable, I think. The interesting, we've just launched our new ED&I strategy at the BBC, and there is, interestingly, I think, very usefully, a shift more towards belonging than diversity. I think it's that whole, if we can get our place in order, there's a recognition that if the workplace and environment isn't accessible and inclusive, there's no point to keep trying to bring people in and then just watching them quietly leave broken because nothing works for them there. And I did challenge, you know, when people have come to us and, well, we've got a new recruitment initiative coming up, you know, can you support us? What do you recommend we do? You know, I have challenged them in meetings and kind of said, I recommend you don't do the recruitment, you fix the inclusion first, and then think about how you bring people in, because all we're doing is damaging them. So it's nice to see that change. I think it is still an issue at the top, but maybe there are reasons for that. There's being Autism Acceptance Month, the National Autistic Society have a film out at the moment. It's How You Show Up, really interesting. And it's about the perspective of an autistic parent looking at that change in perception and awareness and acceptance. It's really cool to recommend. So maybe we've got more opportunities. Sorry, I'm running.
Oh, good. No, we'll take an in-person question, and then I'll do a few online ones as well.
It was just a brief. Oh, it's just as a confirmatory thing. I was talking to my boss's boss at Oracle. He's the guy who fixes Larry Ellison's laptop, among other things. And he is when you talk to him, obviously autistic. But he said he tried to get a diagnosis many years ago and was told that because he was an executive director, it was obviously not interfering with his life, and therefore he could not be considered to get a diagnosis of autism, which is a nice way of making sure that no one in the position of influence can ever be considered autistic. I mean, just from the you know, monotone prosody and so on, you can tell immediately that this guy is autistic as hell.
Yes, I'll answer the question, of course. And I mean, to your point, sir, like I was told many times, I can't be autistic because I have a job and I'm fine, clearly. Sure. So to your question, like what we do is also similar to BBC and a lot of companies. We use companies like employability to hire neurodivergent folks or even disabled folks, you know. But when we get them through the door, we have a retention problem because the workplace is not accommodated, right? So we try to, obviously, there are regulatory frameworks, so there's not really any choice but to accommodate. But the issue becomes where people are not psychologically safe to actually say they need accommodation, they fear retaliation or whatever. So one of the reasons I started doing this is because one of our VP in the US, like the month I started, he actually came out as autistic publicly, internally in our company. And so that, you know, gave me a boost like, oh, wow, that's really awesome. So exactly to your point, you know. So that's, I think, why we do this right now, you know, sort of externally, but this is also a message for our colleagues, you know, look, this is fine. And personally, I've made the choice, and I'm privileged to be able to do it, to be what I call aggressively autistic. So when I go into a room, I say, no, turn off the light, I need this, you know, and I'm being very uncompromising with my needs. It makes a lot of people uncomfortable, and so it's not always fun conversations, but it's kind of the only way, to be honest, from time to time, to just get your point across. Yeah.
Okay, let's do an online question, or Tyler, do you want to respond quickly?
I can do that. Let me, in the interest of time, because I want to reach as many of us as possible, let me combine two questions from online on education. So thank you everyone that's typing in questions. We're going to try to cover as many as we can. So open to the panel in terms of how should knowledge about neurodivergence and the best ways of working be applied in education to avoid disillusioning ND kids? How should teachers implement this? So that's kind of the first part of the question. Similar second question, I'm going to try to combine for us. How can we give children opportunities to sample career paths? Interesting thought here on early ways to establish sustainable interest in relevant careers that will prevent fish from being judged for trying to climb walls. So opportunities and ways to basically implement knowledge about neurodivergence in educational settings. Any thoughts of anyone? Yeah?
I really like the idea of complementary cognition as a kind of properly explored in school and academia, because it will help kind of understand strengths, I imagine, and you know, I imagine there's probably flaws in that as a system, but it hopefully would spot some of those strengths where kids can excel, and then from there you can start channeling them into subjects where, you know, that can be applied, or at least thinking styles, you know, for dyslexia, for example, you know, how can that then be focused on the strengths rather than that kind of deficit model, which I think is is a really interesting thing to play around in the but I understand the resources are slim, but it just feels like there's a real opportunity there to kind of reframe it as a kind of spiky profile thing.
I don't know, just some reflections on the question, I suppose. I think there is more perhaps in the training and education of teachers in that setting. I think we've spoken about that social model of disability. I think that would be good to cover. I think it's the same in the workplace. It's a thing that's being presented, and there are so many other challenges on time and resource and kind of money and effort and other things that are being measured in terms of results and Ofsteds and everything else, that you've also got this kind of, how am I supposed to learn about this as well and deal with this as well? And I know my nephews, that neurodivergence is strong in my family. I have it, my father has it, my sister has it, and my nephew has it. And you know, he struggled. It's also interesting from his perspective. He was given assistive tech. He was given technology to support him in the classroom. He had a tablet or a laptop, but he didn't like using it because of the stigma. He was the only one in the classroom that had a tablet, and then everybody, oh, how come you've got that kind of thing? So I think there's also an element of educating kind of, you know, staff and students in facilities as well. I'm not entirely sure what the answer is exactly, but at least a start in terms of that training and awareness, so that we could build the acceptance and understanding. And I think more children, I mean, when I was at school, nobody was neurodivergent. Nobody had heard of autism. There was nobody dyslexic in the classroom. You know, there were clever people and stupid people, and that was it, and disruptive people, kind of naughty kids, and that was it. So, but I think that is changing. So at least it's there to be spoken of, so which is a start.
Let's see, how many, let's try to do one more in person, one more online. Okay, 2 more in person and then 1 more online. Let's try. Really quickly, David, since you mentioned complementary cognition, I forgot, I was supposed to say, Helen Taylor says hi. She wanted to be here but couldn't make it. Do you want to briefly explain what that is for everyone?
So the idea behind complementary cognition is you have spikes in terms of your, I suppose, your intelligence profile, or kind of like how you are able to look at spatial awareness or different things. And Dr. Helen Taylor, who's also dyslexic, looked at kind of like how dyslexic kids maybe kind of or autistic folk have different strengths and challenges when it comes to their profile. And it's like, well, could you actually marry that up with the education system, or, you know, and, you know, there has been work done in that space where you can look at people's profiles and understand it. So why can't we do that in the school system? And Dr. Helen Taylor is, you know, I recommend go and check out her work. I think she's done some work in Cambridge, and she's also done stuff at Strathclyde Uni, and she absolutely leads this stuff. So yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Thanks. So let's do, if you don't mind, was there a question in the back too? Let's try to combine both questions in the front. We'll do 1 more online. I sense we're going to run over, so we're not going to run away immediately. We will be available in the next room. You can run away if you want, but like, we're going to be in the next room because there's another event right after this. So feel free to ask us some questions now, but let's try to fit in 3 more. Let's go. So yes, in the back.
I really appreciated the comment at the end about it not being all about productivity. Whenever I've encountered these kind of things in the workplace, that's what has been the focus. And the same for all diversity. They say, you know, we need more diversity because studies have shown you'll be how many % more productive. I suppose that's good because it's a way of valuing these things, but I think my question is, how do we move from that to what I think is the next stage of just valuing people inherently?
Yeah, good question. Okay. And then here, save us some time.
My question is also about productivity, and I'm not as far as that. I feel that there is an assumption with inclusion initiatives that if only you bring these people into the fold, the entire team's productivity will improve, and maybe those people, neurodivergent people, will not go into attrition as much. My question is about research. What you mentioned in your slides that some neurodivergent people are up to 30% more productive in certain tasks. Is there research or maybe practice in your companies where you're actually experimenting with what brings out team productivity with those people involved? I remember in my 5OM6, we're running ads, come out neurodivergent people, we need you for pattern recognition. And I was sort of imagining, are they going to put them in a room somewhere where they're going to be locked together, being uber productive? The question I'm asking, there is a piece of research or area of research out there to work out how the team dynamics brings out the best in those people so they stop being attritioned away, or indeed brings out the best in the rest of the team. So far, there is too much assumption that you educate others. There is dual empathy going on, and hunky-dory nirvana after that. I think it's an assumption. I think it's an under-researched area, how to bring out the best in both sides.
Okay. Who wants to start with either of those questions, like somewhat related to productivity, but kind of nuanced?
Love the tough questions. So, look, I don't want to go into your question. I don't want to go into sort of economics theory, right? But we can't change how society values output of productivity. Like right now, us 3, we can't change that, unfortunately. So, you know, society values either output, like monetary output, or a unit of production, right? So for now, we're trying to change this by, you know, talking about how value is intrinsic, right? But that's actually more of a philosophical question than anything else. And if you work at a company like Google, sorry, but like, you know, monetary productivity is gonna matter, unfortunately. And then I don't know who said, like, you evaluate the quality of a society by how they treat their most vulnerable people. You should look at corporations to do that, unfortunately. So we're trying to change minds by saying, look, we can, be productive in different ways. Look at it's also looking differently, but unfortunately we can't change economics models, right? So, and to your second point, we have leeway to do it only when you're senior enough to decide your own team dynamics. So it's going to be extremely some small sample sizes. Like I have like three reports, and so I tell them, please do this task because I suck at it, and you're good at it, and I'll do other stuff that I'm better at. But this is like such a small ecosystem that we have to create, and that's completely self-driven. So you need both the self-advocacy to do it, the autonomy, and the leeway. So that's a lot of factors that a lot of disabled folks are not going to have. So I agree to your point that more research is needed as well.
By all means. It's really, and I think it's interesting that the different remits. So working at the BBC, we're a public service organisation, funded differently. We're not there, we're not listed on the stock market, we're not there to make kind of widgets of stuff. So our measure of performance is different. And I think that allows us the opportunity to value people more in the organisation. And I think that's why, we have this strong presence, we have the staff networks. It is something that is a focus on the organisation. And it's an opportunity that we have, So that's why we need to make the most of it. I think that's why we're able to talk to senior people. We have people on the exec who take this seriously. I think it's part of a journey. I wouldn't say it's perfect right now. And it's the same in any organisation. We're not brilliant. We're not the kind of best practice model everybody should look at. It's all a journey, and it's iterative, and it's how we understand it. But I think, I don't know, I'm sure I've heard it, everybody always tells organisations that people, are the most important asset that they have. And I think increasingly we forget that. In organisations, in societies, in terms of how we measure productivity and performance. But I think our message is about how do we ultimately just value people. That's what the Nirvana point is. We bring people in because we want them to do a job for us. But to your point, yes, we'd love to do some research as well to demonstrate the productivity improvements. I don't want to see autistic people locked in a room going, produce more than those people. Yeah, exactly, and that doesn't feel right either. And don't treat them like they're savants or kind of have these superpowers. Mostly, it's just disabled people, neurodivergent people. They want the opportunity to work. Not because it affords them things, but it's valuable. It gives us purpose and drive and a place in society, and it makes us feel valuable. So we should be valued. Sorry.
I think it comes down, I think as well, like that kind of psychological safety is fundamental to it. Like NT people, ND people, whoever they are, is a kind of part of the Enigma kind of thing for us. It was about neurodivergent and neurotypical people coming together to solve things together. And it's just about providing a space where it's psychologically safe for people just to be themselves. And I think that's the core to it, is if you can provide the psychological safety for someone to be authentic, then I think that's a big part of it. Like, and that's what I think we found with some of the stuff around Enigma is it's like just creating that safe space is critical.
I think that's a good final thought for right now. So a lot of good questions. The problem was we have too many good questions and not quite enough time. So we're over on time. We have to get the next Cambridge Festival event ready. We're going to migrate over to the other room in case anyone has questions. But if not, thank you all for joining us. I hope you have a pleasant weekend. And I wanted to thank all of our panelists who've come from Ireland and Scotland and Manchester to join us here today. So thank you all for being here with us.
Take a break too. Yeah, I might.
Oh, sorry, I took it by accident. Hang on, I'll give you two in a second.
We had an equilibrium.
Oh, you have the, well, I mean,
It's a shame that after that. This
is very solid.
And trying to basically crush the joy of it. Perfect. Well, actually, just a second. Is it privilege if you are not stigmatized because you're autistic in your workplace?
that's the only reason I came.
Photo op time.
Doesn't mean it's necessarily bad, but it's certainly privilege compared to all the other
Head to the next room, see if anyone has questions.
Yeah, is it subjective? Is it situational?
I guess all privilege isn't bad, but there are some things we should be striving to get to everyone.
Correct. But that's the point of the community, so that people feel like they're in a place where they're not being judged for everything's fine and it's not.
So you should just be able, have you got HDMI port or an adapter? And I imagine Chris will come and mic you up.
Do I get the Britney Spears?
Yep.
Excellent.
Yep.
Based on the